Good morning, CP Biology students. This is Mrs. Groves here. Today for your assignment, what we're going to be doing is just checking over the practice problems that you did yesterday, as well as the practice problem that you had to complete from Monday's mini lesson. So what I wanted to do today is just go over the solutions to these. So your assignment is to go back, look at your answers, and see if you can fix them. Are there parts that you missed? Is there a step that you missed, etc.? Because when I started looking at your work, and some of you are just writing the phenotypic ratios or phenotypic percentages rather than the genotypes. Some of you aren't making a key, some of you aren't writing the parents. So I'm going to keep stressing that because in order to solve these problems right, especially when they get more difficult, you need to kind of follow these basic steps. And it also helps me see where you're making a mistake, if you are making a mistake. Okay, so this is the problem that was left from Monday's lesson. I solved one about eye color for you with brown and blue eyes. And this problem is about fur color in mice. So if you look at what the information that you're given, it says gray fur is dominant to white fur, and I picked a letter G for you. Not every problem will do that, okay? Remember, when you choose a letter, that the capital version and the lowercase version should look different so that you don't make a mistake and accidentally switch them up when you're analyzing your results, okay? So the first thing you do is you read the problem and you make a key. Okay, then you're going to write out what the parents are. So it says cross a white male with a heterozygous gray female. That's our parents. After that, we'll make the Punnett square and then we'll write the outcomes. Okay, so it says list the genotypes and phenotype fractions and percentages of the offspring, and what's the probability that this cross produces a white offspring. So a couple questions here. So what I'm going to do now is go to my answer key. My son is playing in the background, so if you hear toys or cries or yells, don't worry, no one's being injured over here. So let's look at my answer key for this problem, and I want you to check your work now too. Okay, let's see, here it is. Okay, forgive me, I wrote on both sides of my notebook paper, so it's a little bit difficult to see, but rather than spend time copying it again, so I wrote out the question again. Big G and little g are the letters that we're using for our allele. All right, we know Big G is the dominant gray color and white fur is the recessive gray color. Okay, so first step, make a key. That's what this is right here. I know the problem says that, but when you look at your results, it's easier if you have a key to look back and say, okay, Big G, little g, what color will that one be? Oh, it will be gray because Big G is the capital gray allele. Okay, so that's my key. Then it says write the parents, so a white male. Okay, I don't know whether I have to use the knowledge of genetics to figure out what his genotype is. So white is the recessive color. So the only way to show a recessive trait is if you have 2 copies of the recessive trait and no dominant letters. So my white male is little g, or he's homozygous recessive. Okay, and a heterozygous gray female, right? Heterozygous we know is 1 big letter and 1 little letter, so they don't even have to say that she's gray. You should know that any organism with big G, little g will be gray. Okay, once you get the parents done, the rest of it is pretty straightforward, but if you mix up the parents, then your Punnett square is wrong and then your outcomes will be wrong as well. Okay, so that's why I say follow the steps, because if you write the parents wrong, but then you do the rest of the problem right, you'll only lose 1 point. Whereas if I don't see your parents or your outcomes, I might not be able to follow your logic. So always follow the steps, okay? So the last step is to complete the Punnett square, right? One of the parents, little g, we put on one axis and we divide up the letters, little g here and little g here. The other parent grows across the top, big G, little g. And then we combine their alleles. What we're looking at is if these 2 mice reproduce, each parent has to give one of the alleles. What are the possible outcomes? Okay, so big G, little g and big G, little g are what we get here. Notice, even though it begins with a little g, I write the big G first. It's just how it's done so that when you look at your results, you'll see that these all have the dominant trait. And then in these squares, I combine 2 little g's. So these are going to look like the father. They don't have a big G, so by default, they're going to show the recessive trait, which is white fur. So then you list your genotype and phenotype. You can write it as a fraction or a percentage or a ratio. I haven't explained the ratio part yet, so I'm going to skip that until later on this week, okay? So count up how many of your boxes are big G, little g. 2 out of 4 are 50%. So 50% big G, and then 50% little g is my genotype for the offspring. And then you have to write what those will look like. Okay, so that's called the phenotype. Big G, there's 50% of them that have this genotype. That means that 50% of them will be gray. Okay, the other 50%, little g, will be white. Okay, so that's all of the steps together. The ending of that question asks you what's the chances of them having a white furred offspring? And we can see what's the chances. You should answer 50%. Okay, so that was from Monday, and then I assigned 4 problems yesterday. I'm just going to flip to that now. So I did have a typo, and a few of you pointed that out to me. Thank you. What ended up happening was I had this question, number 2, also at the beginning of number 3. So it was confusing if you read it that way and didn't realize my mistake. So I apologize for that. If you could and you didn't understand that one, go back now and fix it, okay? So these are more simple dominance problems. I have the steps listed here, but I'm not going to review them again. You can go back to either lesson to kind of look at that. Now we're just going to get right to the key, okay? So the first one's about pea plants. It says round is dominant to wrinkled in the pea seeds themselves, okay? And we're going to cross a homozygous round pea and a wrinkled pea and then look at the outcomes. Okay, so I'm going to go to my key now, or my answer key rather. Let's go scroll down. Here is number 1, okay? In peas, round is dominant to wrinkled. So that's our first thing we're going to do is make a key. So I picked R for round, so the lowercase r would be wrinkled. Some of you are writing 2 different letters, like big R is round and W is wrinkled. Do not do that. If we're talking about round versus wrinkled, you have to use the same letter, okay? And the reason is we can look at more than one trait at one time and cross them. So there is a way to look at 2 traits at one time and make a Punnett square that has like 16 boxes, in which case we would use more than one letter. But when it's one trait that you're looking at, for example, in this one, we're looking at the shape of a pea pod, you only use one letter, a capital and lowercase of that same letter. Okay, so here's my key. Now, what are we crossing? A homozygous round pea and a wrinkled pea. Okay, homozygous means the same letter and it's round. So that's big R, big R. I'm writing out the parents right here. Right? If you make a mistake here, again, your problem will all be incorrect. So homozygous dominant round pea crossed with a wrinkled pea. Okay, or it's homozygous recessive. Wrinkled is the recessive trait, and if a pea is wrinkled, it's going to have 2 lowercase r's, no big R round allele to cover up the wrinkled allele, okay? So when you perform this Punnett square, one parent goes here, separate the letters, one across the top, and we get the same outcome for all 4 offspring. And you can even look here and see that, right? This parent has 2 big R's. The only letter it can give to its offspring is a big R. This parent has 2 little r's. The only letter it can pass along to its offspring is a little r. So the only possible outcome for the offspring is that 100% of them will be big R, little r. That's my genotype, or heterozygous. I don't have to say heterozygous dominant or recessive since it's 1 and 1 and you just say heterozygous. And then for my phenotype, what will they look like? 100% of them will be round. It will be impossible for a homozygous round pea to give you a wrinkled outcome, because you need 2 little r's, okay? So now I'm going to move a little bit quicker since I explained those last 2 problems further in depth. Here's the second problem. It says in pea plants, purple flowers, big P is dominant to white and little p. I gave you the P to use. You could use a different letter if you don't like using P's. The letter doesn't matter. It's how you write out the parents and all that other stuff that does. Okay, so we're going to cross a heterozygous purple plant with a homozygous purple plant. Okay, hopefully at this point you know to make a key. Here's my heterozygous parent and here's my homozygous purple parent, right? If purple is dominant and it's homozygous, it's going to have 2 big P's. So make a key, write the parents, okay? P is a tough letter because capital P and lowercase p can look similar. Just be very careful. Notice how I made sure this one was lowercase down here. So you write one parent here and one here. Combine your alleles, and you end up getting 50% big P, 50% big P, little p, or 50% homozygous dominant, 50% heterozygous. That's your genotypes, the actual letters in the boxes. What will these offspring look like is your phenotype. What color will they be? Well, the big P will be purple, and so will big P, little p. So all of my offspring, or 100%, are purple. Okay. Number 3, you're going to use the same key. Okay, so I didn't write it again, but it says a cross between 2 purple plants yields 25% white offspring. What are the genotypes of the parents? Okay, both of the parents are purple, so I know each parent has to have at least one big P. If they were both big P, big P, big P, big P, could I have a white offspring? No. The only way for them to both be purple, but for them to give me a white offspring, is if each of them is carrying a white allele that's being hidden. So each of them must be heterozygous, and you can see that down here. If they only had big P's, I would never end up with 2 little P's for my white offspring. In this case, 1 out of 4, or 25% of the time, when you cross 2 heterozygous plants that are purple, you'll get a white offspring. So the recessive trait that was hidden in the parents will come out in the offspring 1/4 of the time when you cross 2 heterozygous. Okay, and the last one has to do with guinea pigs, and a few of you had questions about this. So in guinea pigs, black fur is dominant. If a black guinea pig is crossed with a white guinea pig, the litter contains a white offspring, the genotype of the black-haired parent is probably. Okay, so we're dealing with fur color in guinea pigs, and we've got black fur versus white fur. So here's my key here, black fur versus white fur, and they want to know if I cross a black guinea pig and a white guinea pig. So I want to know what the parents probably are, what the black-haired genotype must be. So if I go back here, sorry, I'm scrolling up, move this down a little bit. It's not letting me scroll up anymore. Here's what we'll do. We'll close the box. Okay, sorry, give me 1 second. The screen is just not working properly. Okay, there we go. So the white guinea pig is 2 little b's, right? That's obvious because to be white, you have to have 2 little b's if you are a guinea pig. Now, the other parent has black fur, okay? So that parent is either 2 big b's or a big B and a little b. Well, if that parent was 2 big b's and I crossed it with a white, all of the offspring will be big B, little b, which would be black fur. So none of them would be white since this parent doesn't have a little b to give. Okay, so by default, I know that the black furred guinea pig has to be heterozygous, big B, little b. And I can see that in the Punnett square down here. When I cross a white guinea pig with a heterozygous black furred guinea pig, 50% of them come out big B, little b, or black, but 50% of them also come out white. Okay, if this was a big B, right, and this was a big B here, none of these would be 2 little b's. So that's how I know what this parent is. Okay, so these are just some introductory problems. Please go back and check your work. If you want to resubmit it, feel free. If you still have questions after this, please reach out to me, okay? These problems all are about simple dominance, where one allele fully hides the other allele, okay? We're going to learn that that situation doesn't always happen. So there's something called incomplete dominance, and there's something called co-dominance that I'm going to get to later on. And those problems are going to be a little bit different because they don't follow these exact same rules. So I hope that helped. I hope you were able to kind of see the steps and see the steps in action. That's it for today. So if you have questions, again, reach out and we can set up a time to kind of go over this. I really hate that I can't be with you as you're doing these problems. These are one of those types of things where I like to circulate the room and kind of, I know it's a little weird, but look over your shoulder and see how you're doing. So distance learning in this avenue for me is really difficult. So please try your best. I know it's hard, and we'll get through this. Okay? Bye.